What is up, and welcome to Rad Potential. Today should be a fun one. So what we have here is my 1997 E36 M3, and what we have here is a driver's seat out of a Mazda RX-8. And we are going to put these two together. So if you have an E36 sedan, you will know that the sedan M3 seats are junk. Well, they're not junk. They're quite comfortable, but they give you no lateral support in the hips and the back. You know, it looks like there's bolsters here, but at least this 200,000 mile car, they're very wide. And the last couple times out on the track, I've been plastering my left leg against the dead pedal in the door and my right leg against the tunnel, and that's not a good way to drive on track. It's not a good way to be fast on track. Obviously I should go bucket seat, and that's the plan down the road, but I didn't want to do a bucket seat before doing a half cage in the back. Just not quite ready for that. Well, you know, Eric has a bunch of Mazdas, and he's had a couple RX-8s, I think. At least he's got a bunch of RX-8 seats just sitting around in the shop. So took one off his hands, and we're gonna make some brackets to fit that RX-8 seat in here. This is a factory manual seat car. As you can see, RX-8 seats are also manual, at least this one is. It's cloth, and even though this one's a little tore up, it is way better bolstered and a little bit snugger of a fit, at least for my wide hips. As you can see here, and this little bit of shoulder bolster here, I fit so much better in this seat, and the cloth, I don't really slide around on it, so it's a win-win. And this is just gonna be a temporary thing. I got a free seat from Eric. We've got a welder in the garage and some angle iron. If we got to cut up and make some brackets, we're gonna figure it all out in this one. We'll see whichever slider works best to use. It looks like this mount's totally different because as you can see, the M3 seat bolts flat to the ground here and in the back. So first things first, we're going to pull this out, line these up, and see how they how similar the brackets are, how close the bolt holes are, and we'll start brainstorming and figure out a solution to get that in there. Should be a pretty easy task. Hopefully we can knock it out just tonight, and we don't need to go buy any more bolts or supplies. If we do, we do. But we're gonna get this done before our track day in a week and a half, or a little less than that, up or down at NCM. So should be a fun one. Stay tuned, and I'll give you a little how to put an RX-8 seat in your E36, if anyone else was ever crazy enough to do that. Seems like a good idea to me, so stay tuned. So first thing to do is to remove your stock seat. Put these little plastic caps over the bolts if you're lucky, and it's a 16 millimeter. There's one up front, two up front on either side. And then, well, if you got a sedan, you're lucky enough to have a back door to reach the back bolts. So we'll pop those four bolts out, and then the seat should just lift right out. So we've run into our first design constraint for this effort. After the four bolts, the seat belt is lower mounting point is right here. It goes through this little piece of plastic and bolts here. It's a T50. That poses a design constraint because now we either have to use that seat bracket, seat slider, the E36 one, so we can keep that same bolt location, or we're gonna have to find a place to mount that over here, which this is all covered in plastic. We might have to do some digging to see what's under there. So we'll start brainstorming now after we pull the seat out, and see what we can do here. All right, we have now hit design constraints 2 and 3. If you're familiar with E36s, E46s, you might be familiar with this and could have called me out already. But the seat is very much offset between the sliders. You can see where the two sliders are center compared to where the center of the seat is. That's not the case for the RX-8 seat. And then the next hang up is the seatbelt receptacle. So I started measuring up bottom of the seat rails. The RX-8 seat rail is not too far off. It's like ½ an inch here on the rear bolt points. So these are bolts and this is studs in the M3. The fronts are studs. As I showed you before, the front of the RX-8 has a little bracket that turns down, so that's not going to work. But my thought process was, let me test fit the seat in there, see how close it actually looks to the bolt holes and the studs, and see how centered or off-centered it feels. Well, I set the seat in here. As you can see, it fits all right. Let me show you in the back real quick. I have this tunnel side bolt in, and you can see here the outside of the car is only off a bit, but I think I'll be able to reuse that bracket if I just cut that hole out a little bigger, stick a big washer on there. I'm an aerospace engineer and I think that's plenty good. But we'll see. This is early thought processes. So the back might work out all right. The front, on the other hand, well, I'll show you. Let me push this back and sit in it. That's with the seat back. Right now it's canted back pretty far because, like I mentioned, the front of the RX-8 seats has a different style bracket. As you can see over there, the bracket is vertical and it needs to go horizontal over the stud. However, so it's canted back a little bit, which isn't the worst as far as feel. It puts you in there. It's kind of, some bucket seats sit like this. It's not so bad, but I think I'll want to flatten it out just a little bit. Plus side, I am almost centered. I feel like just as much centered as a stock E36 seat, so I think that issue's gone. Plus side, I don't know if I just said this, it sits way lower, and I think if I move that bracket down a little bit more, obviously it's going to get a little bit lower than that. So, and I think I'm going to try to cut and flatten these brackets out because they're not too far off fitting onto those studs. So I think that's step one, get the seat fitting on the bottom, and then I'll sort out the receptacle and the belt situation. Might be easier than I thought. I thought it was going to be difficult here for a second, but we'll see. This might work out. Before I go ahead and cut these brackets off and make my own that'll fit that, they weren't super far off. So I've got heat and a variety of bending tools. And that's what I'm going to start with. I could notch this here, the side of this bracket, and it would bend really easy, but then I'd want to like tack it back together so it wouldn't just bend on its own. So what I think I'm going to do before my first attempt to get these in the right place, I'm going to heat up like right here, right on this 90-degree angle there on both sides of these, and then I'll just grab them with my vice grips and assortment of bending tools, see if I can just flatten that out. And if it just mostly, if I get the bolt hole flat and there's still a little bit of rise there, I'll still keep a little bit of that cant back in the seat, which I think will feel nice and planted while driving. And this might just work out. Here's my finished product. Well, my halfway through finished. They're flat. Both sides are basically flat. While I let that cool down before I test fit it back in, I'm gonna now see if I can figure out what to do with my receptacles. The first one should be easy since this is threaded on the actual other side. So I'll just need to find a place to drill a hole on this side of the seat bracket Maybe even like right there might work. And then just thread that bolt through. Now the other one is going to be a little bit more tricky. I've got to disassemble this guy, which looks like it mounts here, and then we'll see if we can bolt that up to this same bolt hole. Maybe we'll just be so lucky and this will work right out. So it turns out the receptacle might be the easy one. There's just one 16mm nut right here. Pull that sucker off. Now this thing's disconnected. It's got some cables and airbag stuff going on. I'm going to pull this cover off, and then the metal bracket connects down here to this. That's all we need. So I could, and it only holds in that one bolt hole, so I won't be changing any structural dealy-whopper with how this gets mounted, as long as I have that one bolt hole in. So I could probably chop the rest of this off and then bolt it to our same hole right there. This is going to work out quite well. Okay, I figured I'd give you an update of where we're at with the receptacle. Got it off, and then I kind of just had to break this plastic, this airbag restraint thing, whatever this is. It's like a sealed unit, so you really have to break it to get it off. And then I was lazy. Instead of unbolting the receptacle here, I just snipped the wire that it went to, so that's off. Not going to use it again, not really worried about it. I'm sure I could find another part at one if I ever wanted to put the seat back in. The last things left is the wire that goes to the seatbelt receptacle, so it knows your seatbelt's plugged in. Since I'm keeping a stock seatbelt in right now, I might as well keep that function. So that wire just goes to this little clip right here. I'm going to be using this so I can still plug that in after I mount it to the seat. So I am just going to fish this wire out from under the seat here, just tugging on it. I'm going to help push it back through there, and then I'll retain my factory seatbelt notification, and it won't buzz and beep on me, which will be good. So pulling the RX-8 receptacle off was super easy. It's just a 17mm bolt, and then I cut some zip ties and fished out the cable. So that one's getting set aside now. And now this is looking like it's going to mount up there pretty easily. I'm going to use the same bolt that came off the RX-8 seat. It's just a little too big for this bracket, because this one's like keyed so it won't turn. I'm not terribly worried about that because there's a little pin oh, I wasn't showing. I'm not terribly worried about that because there's a little pin here that's going to keep this thing from rotating too much once it's bolted down. So I've got my little stepper bit on my drill here, and I'm just going to open that hole up a little bit until it fits. All right, I got the Dremel out, and that did the trick. Now you can see that hole's nice and rounded, and the little shoulder here fits through, and it's nice and flush. Actually, oh, we still got a washer for the other side, so that will bolt in there now. Let's see how it works. So that worked out just fine. I didn't have to cut this bracket at all. All I had to do was add a washer on this side of the bracket. That way that it actually pinched the bracket and didn't move around, because that shoulder was a little too big for this piece of metal compared to this one is a little bit thicker. Or that shoulder's meant to be there so that one can move. Because yeah, that's it. Because this one pivots down there. However, the BMW one pivots over here, not on that bolt. So now we're good. We've got our seatbelt in. We just need to drill a hole on the other side to mount the floor mount of the seatbelt. All right, next clip, next day. I had to give up last night because storms came in and I was working in the garage. Rained all day today, but I retreated to the garage, moved some stuff around. But I've got the seat. Just after the last clip, I dropped the seat in just to test fit it so I could see where I want to like cut up this plastic down here, which you might not see it. So maybe I'll just trim this whole back half off so there's more real estate to mount that to. And then I wanted to see where my mounting points were looking. So let me grab a flashlight and I'll show you. It's coming together okay. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of little bit more modification than I was hoping. So you can see it's rocked back a little bit right now, but the tunnel side here is on the stud, which is good. However, this side, I just went out here, this side isn't quite lined up. The hole is this way. However, it's about an inch off center this way. So I'm gonna need to like cut that bracket off, make a new one, and or make a little adapter bracket to sit in there. And then if you look in the back, let me move the seat forward. In the back, we're not in too bad a shape. We've got this one on the hole with bolt going through it. This side is just not quite lined up. As you can see, the length's a little different. So there's the hole. If I can get this to just sit somewhere good that you can see. The bolt hole's right here, and there's obviously where the hole is now. So I think I'm gonna like break these rivets out and maybe weld the bracket on whatever this distance is, 1.5 inches, an inch back, so that it lines up. And then I should be able to feed the bolt in and thread it down. It might be like a thread it as the seat goes down kind of deal, but I still think that's easier, or the easiest way to move that bracket back. So that's where we're at. I'm gonna pull the seat back out and start modifying. All right, so you just saw me get the seat back in to test fit it again, and test fit my rear mount, and it came out pretty good. Obviously, you saw me put it all together. Don't look too closely at my booger welds, but there's the bolt in the hole, and on this side, we got the bolt in the hole as well. The stud is on the, or the seat is on the stud on the tunnel side up front. I still need to adjust the bracket on this side. But I ran into a little predicament. You saw me cutting up the side of the seat over here, outside of the car. There wasn't a good place to mount the bottom of the seat belt on the side of here like I was hoping. I thought there was more metal under here. And you want to mount it to something stationary so it's not moving with the seat. You want to mount it to the bracket, the slider. So I found a decent solution. Here's what the bracket looks like. And then let me go back in the back and show you what I was thinking. So here's the seat rail. This is like the pedestal, the foot of the slider. And this thing has a nice kink in it. So I'm just gonna flip the kink around from how it was set on the BMW seat. And then I'm gonna fish it down here. I'm gonna set you down for a second. So as you can see now, you're sideways in the car. But can you see the bracket down there? Moving right here, there's the bolt hole. I got it on the inside of that pedestal. I'm gonna mark that right where that hole is, drill it, because that hole is threaded on the seatbelt. and then I'll be able to just stick our little bolt through that foot pedestal, and that'll be our new mount for the bottom of the seat belt. And it should be plenty strong. It's a little bit thicker than like a sheet metal part that foot bracket is, and the bolt is going to be the same. It's loaded the same way in shear as it was on the BMW seat, so we should be all good there. All right, flash forward an hour and it's in. It's all done. So the little spot I drilled out on that bottom rear bracket worked out perfect. Let me get my light. So it worked out well. You can see it mounted up down there. I'll move the seat forward and you can see, but that's as far as the seat goes back. Oh, I also bent this one a little bit more and it was able to fit over the stud and went down. And then the seat's in and it's nice. It is lower than the stock E36 seat, which is good. The downside is I used the RX-8 bracket and sliders, as you know, and where those mounting locations were, put the seat a little closer than ideal. Like Eric probably won't be comfortable driving this car now because the seat doesn't go back far enough. As with me having it all the way back, I'm like an inch closer than I'd like to be. My hands feel good, I feel close to the shifter, everything's comfortable, but my legs, my knee is a little bent on the gas pedal. The dead pedal feels okay, but having my heel on the bottom of the gas pedal, my knee's a little off the bottom of the seat. I'm showing you my leg, but anyway, you get what I mean. Overall, pretty stoked. It's in there firm. The only play that's there is this is all in the seat and in the sliders. That's all in the slider. So it's all mounted firm. I'll show you what I did in the back to see. You can tell how like jaded it is forward based on the RX-8 mounting location. But let me show you what I did in the back here. That little drilled hole is right here. Put a washer on it and got my seatbelt mounted to the bottom there. And then the sliders for the E36 seat were a little bit thicker where it mounted, so I had to throw some washers in there because the bolts bottomed out. And as I mentioned, that one has to like feed in as you're putting the seat in. Because of this, you have to like put the bolt in there and then lower it down and tighten it. And then go a quarter turn at a time, and it's the same for the front. The way the brackets are, you've got to like quarter turn wrench it in. But I'd say that's totally worth it for the simplicity of me just bending those brackets and putting them in there. It all feels sturdy. Again, this is like a temporary solution probably for the next year of tracking. I'm hoping over the winter, over this coming winter, or into next season, I'll be stripping the rear and doing an actual half cage, and then we'll put a bucket seat in it and get proper safety harnesses and everything. So this is just to get as much seat time as possible this year, but actually benefit from a better seat. And all in all, I think it's gonna work out well. I'll give you a feedback in a week after the day at NCM. But with that and the CG lock, I think it's gonna be a pretty good setup. Or let me know if you think I should have chose a different seat, because that probably could have gone anyway with any other seat. It would have been a similar mounting and bending and welding new brackets on. So anyway, thanks for following along with this one. Stay tuned for track content in like a week when Eric and I get down to NCM. Anyway, keep it rad.